Okay, the conclusion of another rather eventful White House press briefing by the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. There are two main stories that Ms. Sanders needed to address from the podium today. I'll talk about the first one, and that is the Washington Post reporting that President Donald Trump dictated a statement to his son, Donald Trump Jr., about a meeting he had with a Russian lawyer last year during the presidential campaign. The president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, now a senior advisor in the White House, was also at that meeting, as was his then campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. Now, in response to the Washington Post report that the president himself had dictated a statement that was later characterized as misleading, the statement that Don Jr. gave to the New York Times, the press secretary said there was no inaccuracy in that statement. The president weighed in as any father would, based on the information he had. I want to bring in Chip Reid now, who is sitting in the press briefing. Chip, I was just saying to our audience how Sarah Huckabee Sanders responded to this Washington Post report. From your vantage point, did she either confirm or deny any of the Washington Post reporting that the president did indeed dictate that statement to Don Jr.?
Well, I think she was somewhere in between. She said that the president weighed in as any father would. I'm not sure this is a case for a father weighing in on something that's going on with his son. This is a very important issue having to do with Russia and the United States on dealing with the Russians. So I'm not sure what being a father would have to do with this, but that's what she hung it on. She also said there was that he did not dictate the statement. He weighed in but did not dictate. So somewhere in between, but certainly she was not clear on exactly what the role of the president was in putting out that statement that was put out under the name of Donald Trump Jr.
One of the reporters in the briefing room mentioned an interview that Senator Lindsey Graham gave this morning in which he implied that the president was, quote, caught in a lie by this. Who will he have to answer to, President Trump, on remaining questions that are clearly still out there about this?
Well, with this president, it's not clear at all who he has to answer to, because he's only held one formal press conference the entire time he's been in office. He's had a number of other questions where it's limited to one or two. His individual interviews are usually with news organizations that don't press him on questions like this. So I'm not sure he's going to be forced to answer to it. And as you just saw with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she's not going to get pinned down on this either. So it's hard to say who he's going to have to answer to on things like this.
Some have wondered whether this reporting will draw attention from Special Counsel Robert Mueller, who is, of course, continuing to look into any possible links between the Trump campaign and the Russians. But let's move on to the other big topic that came out today, this lawsuit about the murder of Seth Rich. This lawsuit alleges that the White House and Fox News in some ways colluded to concoct a story about Seth Rich's murder to distract from the Russia investigation. Again, these are allegations in a lawsuit by an individual that worked at Fox News. What was Sanders' response to that?
Well, her response to that was that the president had no knowledge of the story, contradicting what was said in the lawsuit, that the president was pushing for the story to be published, to be aired. She also said that the White House had no involvement in this story. And she also said that there are no litigants here who have anything to do with the White House, so it's really irrelevant to what goes on at the White House. Certainly, if what is claimed in the lawsuit is accurate, if the president really did know about this story ahead of time and pushed for the story to air, a story that was turned out to be false and was retracted and that had very little substance behind it in the first place, certainly that could damage the president down the road. But keep in mind that a lawsuit can be filed by anybody claiming anything. So there's no reason for us to believe at this point, other than what's said in the lawsuit, that that's what happened. And at this point, the White House is denying that the president had any knowledge of this.
Yeah, as is Fox News, and that is important to point out. Chip, anything else that was highlighted during this press conference that you'd like to point out?
Well, certainly the police brutality issue came back again, and that's always an interesting one. April Ryan, who frequently asks about this issue, was asked if the president might issue an apology for saying at that speech he gave before police officers that they don't need to be nice to suspects, suggesting that they could bang their head against the car when they're putting them in the car instead of covering their heads. She said, I would have to ask the president if an apology is appropriate. I asked her, does that mean you are going to ask the president if an apology is appropriate? And she was evasive on that.
No, even police associations have
right.
come out in criticism of those comments by the president.
That's exactly right.
Chip Reid, thanks so much.
My pleasure.